Welcome to Solo Spotlight, episode 47. I'm your host, Ryan Macdougall. Today, we're diving into a story about resilience, leadership, and mindset. The real, raw journey behind entrepreneurship. My guest, Daniel Brimblecombe, has spent over 2 decades building and scaling businesses down in Australia. But his path hasn't been without struggle. Near bankruptcy, team drama, burnout, and hard pivots have all shaped the leader and thinker he is today. What makes Daniel's story stand out is not just his business wins or losses, but the way he's anchored his journey in the philosophy of Stoicism, ancient wisdom helping him maintain clarity, discipline, and emotional balance in the chaos of building something meaningful. If you find value in conversations like this, make sure you subscribe, like, and share so more people can benefit from these stories and insights. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or just someone interested in how mindset can carry you through tough times, this conversation offers practical lessons and honest reflections you don't want to miss. So settle in and let's get into it. Daniel, welcome. Solo Spotlight, episode 47 with Ryan Macdougall. I just want to take the time, Daniel. It's Brimblecombe.
Yes, Brimblecombe. That's right. That's really
Brimblecombe.
good.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to make sure I got the pronunciation. I'm so bad with names that like sometimes the last names. But yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. You have been thriving as of recently in Australia with 20 years experience in the entrepreneur industry, scaling businesses, helping businesses succeed. How's it work for you in Australia? What's some cool things you can tell me about the land down under?
Well, we all ride around on kangaroos down here, and
Yeah.
and you got to watch out for the drop bears. But
The,
it is a very interesting place, and everyone wants to travel here. But
mhm.
yeah, it's there's probably historically there's a lot nicer places to go, a lot more exciting places to adventure. But definitely, if you want beaches and some serenic surrounds, then it's definitely the place to be.
Do you find the time zone, especially in like the podcasting realm, do you find that gives you like logistical nightmares, or do you find that you're trying to book guests that like kind of help you with that, like complement that?
Well, I think because I've been working across because I've worked with clients all over the world from India. I've had the CEOs there, Germany, all through the US, Canada, and because I've been doing it for so long, really, I think, with working with time zones, you've got to weigh up the value of that time,
Hmm.
that timing, and a lot of the time, if you review the guest and they're really valuable, or the client, then you're prepared to adjust your timing a bit. But it's
Yeah.
where I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, where they sort of too flexible for everyone, and that's where they burn out with the time zones. But because we've been doing this for a long time, and we work with the virtual assistants, we sort of work a day and a night shift anyway with that.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
so it's not too
definitely
great.
especially getting into like I'm sure when you notice getting into like the virtual assistants and especially doing it yourself, how much of it turns into like a team atmosphere. Like it's really hard to accomplish some of these things because like you can't be everywhere all at once, and it starts to become like a nightmare in a sense of like trying to make sure you're managing everybody's expectations and getting everything on time and making sure everything's provided to like it, it's it really speaks to the idea that it's not just like a one person army. Like it's definitely like a team thing, especially when you look at scaling. But I kind of want to get jumping into your story and like take me back like 20 years. This is when you first started building businesses. You had an early venture early on, kind of getting close to the bankruptcy uh, area there. Kind of bring me through that in your early stages, like what got you into it, as well as like where you kind of ended up and how you like pivoted.
Oh, it's really 20 plus years now. But when I was originally, I started working in a real estate office when I was a teenager, and I realized that I really loved the marketing end of things. And when I was a teenager, I was very introverted. And I actually had to learn to be a lot more extroverted because I didn't talk to people. I studied people and I understood how they all worked because I could identify them. So I started watching other people, and I was loving the marketing. And the principal of the real estate office came to me because I was working in there in a traineeship part time, and he goes to me, "You don't talk to people. You're not very extroverted. What do you want? Do you really want to be a real estate agent? Do you really think that you can do that? What do you really want to do?" And I said, "Oh, well, I want to be an entrepreneur." And he looks at me dead in the eye. And I think these moments are really the ones that everyone has through their journey. And he says to me, "You'll never be an entrepreneur." That's what he says to me over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
no, that's really interesting because then you say like to look back now, you're like, oh, was that guy awfully foolish?
Yeah, well, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I can remember. I can. He was only a very. He's a very short man, and I don't
Mhm.
know if he's around anymore. He might have because he was quite old then, and I know that his son took over the business and so on. But then from there, I started doing the marketing, and I really was really loving the marketing, and they will love me having me in the office, and they wouldn't move me on to sales because I was so good
Mhm.
at the marketing. But I was becoming more extroverted through the time, and then I started taking on clients. And one of my first clients was my mother, and
Okay.
she was opening up a remedial massage business from home. And uh, I started doing. I designed up all her flyers. We did her marketing campaign around that. We had special offers, and then within like 12 months after that, and as I was approaching, because I would have been 16 then, around 16, as I was approaching my 20-year-old self, and I was still doing this kind of work, and I was coming out of high school. I started running a friend's business, which was a magazine. I was working in the magazine, and also he bought another business distributing stuff for people in network marketing, and that was a company called Spectrum Marketing. It's not around anymore. He got out of that, but he had a magazine which was a network marketing magazine. So it got me more into the marketing and the sales space. And then my mum didn't want me to do any more marketing for her because her business was going through the roof, and she had more clients, referral base, and everything than she could handle.
Right.
And then I actually opened up a marketing consulting agency on the waterfront of Redcliffe, Queensland, and this was
Okay.
before social media and everything came through. And I was building that up. I brought in some of my friends to do it. I had some salespeople. I had graphic designers, and we started to chip away. And then we got into the printing equipment, and that's really where it started to. The overheads went from here to here, and it's we started taking on big clients, and that's sort of where it went wrong because the big clients couldn't pay anymore, and that's where.
Right.
And I was
And then you just had too much overhead.
yeah, too much overhead. There's
And was
yeah,
that with the equipment? Sorry, was that with like the
yeah, a
equipment
lot
and
of the
buying?
overhead, but the big thing was we were closing enough deals and we were bringing in enough clients, but the clients weren't paying on time. And I was talked into back then. People said that you'd sit down with them. There wasn't the internet around. We started doing websites and we were doing banner ads, and everything like that. But they were telling me that everyone gives us a 30-day account. If you want to work with us, you give us a 30-day account. And I
And
was
that's
like,
like a 30-day repayment?
yeah,
Or how
30
does that
days.
work?
So you do the work and they pay 30 days later because they're a big
Yeah,
company. But
right.
those
So
big
it's like you should be
companies
honored.
hit
Yeah,
30 days and they didn't pay, and a lot of them went under.
right.
So
And then it's like, well, now I'm definitely not getting my money.
that's it. And then I had staff issues where because I was very I thought because you're very naive in the early days, and you think that everyone's going to do the right thing a lot of the time, and you
Hmm.
think that if you hire someone, they're going to because I had designers that would send off the wrong artwork from a previous revision. And they would print up a massive banner or a whole thousands, lots of booklets, and then the client will get them back and say, "This is the previous version. I'm
Yeah,
not
and you
paying
just
for
lit all
this."
your money on fire,
Yeah, and the margins were
basically.
getting tighter and tighter on that. So
Right. So
it's
every mistake was like a huge chip.
Yeah, that's it. But I one day I just got to the point where I just and I was actually designing, Vistaprint.
Yep.
I was designing the first variation of what that could have been. And I
Yeah.
had a couple of friends come to me and said, "Oh, we'll bail you out financially. We'll get you back on track just so we can have a chunk of that software that you're making." And
Hmm.
I thought this is great. But the thing is that you get to the point where you get so self defeated. Which if I had my time again, I would have taken one of those bailouts and I would have made that run in hindsight. But
Right.
you get so burnt out and you get so bashed down with things, and if you don't have the mindset right, then you just let it all go. That's where we self sabotage in that. And I ended up one day I just went, I can't cope with this anymore, and I shut the doors. It was just like an overnight thing. I couldn't take, because I was closing, chasing that after those bills. And I mean, lots of business owners these days that are in that cycle, that you're constantly, people think that you have a business. They think that you just made of money, and money is always just pouring out of everything. But most things are
Yeah.
covered in debt, which is another lesson through that. And then I burnt out, and I had nothing. I had debt collections coming after me then, and for 3 days I sat on the lounge playing Tetris on the
Mm.
on the, on the Xbox. While the phone, I recharged my mobile phone every day, and it would just vibrate on the coffee table. And then
Yeah.
until one day, I went into the kitchen and I imagined I could push the fridge over and push it next to the dishwasher, and that would
Yeah.
create a line.
Yeah.
And that day, I let it all. Yeah, I decided that I had to get myself back on track.
How was it
Essentially,
having then that many employees in like your mid 20s?
oh, that was my
Was that a
early
hard
20s.
thing? That,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was my
like in your early
yeah.
20s, how
It
was
was
that like being responsible for other people and their careers?
it was stressful, and the people, I really didn't make the best choices. I had a friend that I hired as my operations manager, and I use him as an example now. I haven't heard from him in quite a few years now, but I use him as an example now because all the way through, he reminded me of most entrepreneurs that start out, and he was older than me. He was in his early 40s, and I was in my early 20. I was a bit over 20, and he would just delay things all the way through. And like, for example, when so I brought him in to start with me in the marketing, and he goes, "Oh, I'll go out and prospect for clients when I have business cards." So I designed the business cards. I got him business cards, and I gave him a box of business cards. And then he goes, "Oh, I'll go prospect for clients when we have the office."
Hmm.
I open up the office. The first day, he's sitting there setting up his computer, playing Flight Sim on the computer.
Right. Right.
So, and this is where that's really massive for people, that they should be they got to prioritize what's important in the business. And business cards, logos, websites, it's all just smoke and mirrors outside of the actual cash flow and the outside of those connections and actually closing those deals.
And like when you look at yourself like in a leadership role at that point, did you like did you feel like it was like hard because it was your friend, or do you feel that it was hard because like you didn't have that like leadership skill? What was that like? Cuz I'm just trying to like think of it in my own way. Like I do a podcast with my friends, and sometimes like you have to have those tough discussions, but it's hard to measure like am am I going too far because like it's me personally like driven by what I want to do in my own success, or is it what I'm feeling about everybody, or like so how were you able to like compartmentalize what you were doing and being able to like focus, like knowing that you were actually focusing on the right thing, going like this isn't ego driven, or this isn't like because I'm pissed off because he's playing flight sim, but maybe it takes him only 2 hours to do the work, right? Like I find that's like a hard balance with myself of like, am I saying this because I think I'm doing more than this person, or is this like a legitimate thing that I'm asking from this person?
You're Of course, they always say that if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to, I can't remember the exact saying, but essentially, what I've learned over the time is to not have those kind of friendships in the business unless you set those boundaries, unless you set those expectations, because you don't want, if somebody, regardless of who they are, if they become a dead weight in your business, then you've got to drop them off the boat.
Hmm.
And because you can't allow them to weigh you down. And if people aren't matching your energy and matching your drive, you've got to you sometimes you have to be the bad person, and we don't want to feel bad about it. And possibly the hard conversation is, look, I really want to still be your friend, but I need to build this business. Are you with me or you're not? And give them a chance. See, I
Hmm.
the next business that I went through that almost that sort of he shafted me in that business partnership, because that first one I retained the business, but we became friends. What I thought was friendship over the time, but essentially he ended up shafting me in the end over greed and thinking there was a massive payday at the end of the tunnel. But he ended. I know that to this day that he's without me he fluctuated. But
Hmm.
essentially now the real lesson for me was I had to separate the two out. And these days I don't have a lot of friends.
Right.
I tend to focus on my business. I focus on my own personal development. I got people that I talk to, but at the same time, you've also got to let it aside. A lot of people are doing what they think is society correct, or doing what
Hmm.
they think that they're supposed to do, instead of becoming awake to what things really are. And often people go, "Oh, they're my friends," but they're actually being so toxic and they're bringing you down. And a lot of the time they see you getting successful, and that's when they latch on again, and that's when they want to be around. They want to be part of the success, but if they're not there for the because a lot of people just are thinking illogically about this life. They really are. They're
Hmm.
thinking that it's all feel goods, it's all amazing. Oh,
It's
high
like the
five
nice guy
my best
finishes
buddy.
last.
Yeah,
It's like
that's it.
nice guy finishes last. But it's also too like it's interesting you say that, because it is like one of these things where you have to have like the hard conversations. But what's the difference between like being rigid but not like being a dick? You know what I mean? Like being rigid and having like, when you say you're like consulting for someone else or you're mentoring someone else, is that like a red flag that you would tell someone like, "Hey, I have like two business partners and they're like my coworkers from a previous business and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Is this like, oh, there's still a way that you can work it out? Or is it kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, no, like it's not going to work because you're always going to look like the dickhead no matter what?
Well, you've got to stop allowing, because a lot of the time when people see you as the dickhead, they're putting their own brush on it. They're also trying to project something onto you because it's an insecurity in themselves. So,
Hmm.
and that's where, because if you're driving towards a goal and you all share that goal, then and they're not, and they're claiming to share it, and then they're saying, "Oh, Ryan, you're carrying on like a dickhead, and you want to push me. You don't want me to go out on the weekends. You want me to work more hours because we've got this
Right.
important deal going through." Then that's really an issue with them, because they're projecting the issue, the reason, their excuses for procrastinating what needs to be done onto you, and saying, "Oh, the reason why I'm not doing what I need to do is because of Ryan." And if he just
Right.
chilled out, then it'll be fine.
Right.
Which
And,
isn't.
and and like when you look at like doing things like solely, my next question would be like, who is the arbiter of truth? Like how do I know that like my vision is like the correct, like is this just a, like are you just trusting your gut at this point? Or like where is the fact checking coming into play, and how do you measure that, of like knowing, is this like kind of like trial by fire, or do you have like an internal system in place that you can kind of know that you're doing the right thing?
Well, I always collect the information. I listen. If you, you got to ask those questions as well of the person that you're working with. And the thing that I love about I got my team. I've got my four personal VAs now that do all my ins and outs, and they're like my
Mhm.
business partners. They keep me accountable. They organize all my stuff. I always ask them for their opinion, and I ask everyone for their opinion, because of course I still got partnerships now. I work with other people on other businesses, but I don't give them the whole pie. I'm only working with them on this project. This is
Right.
ours. This is mine over here.
Yes.
Which and if I'm not attached to the outcomes of this. If this falls over, I'm still growing at what my vision and dream is. But at the same
Right.
time, I fall back on Stoicism, which got me back on track and stopped me and got me onto the key thing. And Marcus Aurelius in Stoicism talks about if somebody has an opinion or a belief that is something's a different way, and they can convince me with new information that their way is better, then I'll happily adopt their belief and their way.
Mhm.
So you've always got to be a student of life, I think, is the thing. And if somebody's got something, if somebody's conflicting with you, and you've got, because a lot of people bring their ego and everything into it, and that's where they look like they're somebody that's not they don't want to work
Mhm.
with anymore. So
Right.
if you're seeking that information from them, and you're going into it with an open mind, because you've got to be a student of life, and you've got to be a student of other people, and people are irrational, and that's where you've got to use your gut instinct as well. And you've got to look at that person, and you've got to think, are they just projecting something onto me and avoiding what they don't want to do, or do they actually have a valid point? And are they actually
Mhm.
fighting up against Hill? Because you can actually, if you dig into that, normally you can work it out whether they're just doing it because often people will self sabotage and they'll sabotage you because of their own limiting beliefs and the way that, because at the same time there's also the saying that people want to see you do well but not better than them,
Yeah.
and that they might be subconsciously sabotaging you. So it's a very, of course, there's no right or writing answer. So sometimes it is a trial by fire. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you just got to run with something. I love something. There's a saying at the moment that I keep seeing on videos: is how shameless do you need to be successful?
Mhm.
And it's and if you, because a lot of people carry shame and guilt and everything, and that's what stops them from doing the next thing. If you stuff up, then accept it, then learn from that, because that's what I've really found. Because I'm in my being in my late 30s now, I haven't achieved half of what I wanted to by this stage, but I've achieved so much. But I took away all the guilt and everything of everything, because some things just didn't work out. But the consistency I always fall back on is the fact that I can do marketing consulting and I can build up businesses, and I know. But now at this point, I can always see where the errors are. I've got all the red flags based on all these previous experiences. So
Mhm.
it's
I I find it I find it interesting because you look at a lot of people that get really, really successful, and like there's always some sort of like personal turmoil. Like they get divorced, they lose this, they lose that, they don't spend time with their kids, whatever it is. Question that I have is like, given all of your experience and like how long you've been in it, do you think like personal success and professional success, like you can only have one, and how do you actually balance that? Because it's a lot of people when they talk they say you have to be delusional, you have to be delusional, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm delusional on one end, and I always say it with like my friend group or people I work with, you either have the people that are working a shit ton of overtime and they're grinding it out, but you look at their home life and it's kind of broken and fractured, and like you, but it's like, well, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And it's kind of like, if I focus as much on both, am I kind of just in a stalemate now of like, well, I've just kind of throttled both of them of like, well, I can have them both, but I can't really excel. Like there's like a definitive ceiling now of like what I can do because I have children or because I got married or whatever it is. And like, is that a consideration that people who are actually trying to get to like that next level should be considering?
I actually think that you can have it all. But I think the biggest issue, because I've learned this, like I've had many failed personal relationships, but they were with all the wrong women. They were with all the wrong ones. And I think that's the key, where people need to be awake enough to actually stop doing the things that, because people, I mentioned before, people do the things that they think they're supposed to do, but you're supposed to find the right partner. People are so quick to find the wrong partner and go, oh, this is good enough, this is the best I can do. But
Because this is what people want me to be. This is what it, like the expectation is of like, oh yeah, everybody around me will be happy if I like
yeah.
do this.
Well, a lot of the time, people are so quick, and people are slaves to their desires, their immediate,
Hmm.
because they want that immediate buzz. So as soon as you
Right.
let go of that immediate buzz, you can actually look at your whole life and actually map it out. and you can be amazing in all areas if you stop doing the things that are so self-destructive. A few years ago, just out of the blue, I just said I'm not drinking alcohol ever again, and I boxed up all the booze that I had. Like I had bottles, and I gave it to my neighbor. I said, "Here you go." And they're like, "Oh, nice. You sure you don't want this?" No, I don't want it, because I realized the next day it would be wasted. Uh, because you drink one day and you waste the next, and there's so many other things that we're doing that are toxic. And a lot of the time, the thing about being a good partner and in a good relationship and a good friend, a good in business, if you want those, you've got to work out what's really important to you. And if that is, then you can make it work. But you've also got to show up for that. Somebody that's really good for this is Brendan Burchard. I don't know if you're familiar with Brendan Burchard.
No.
I was listening to an interview, a thing that he was talking about, because he does highly effective habits, and he was talking about that he got called by one of his top multi-million-dollar CEO digital tech clients, and he flew there at 3 o'clock in the morning and sat in the boardroom, and they said to him, "Look, I don't want to work less, but I want to show up more for my family. I want to be more of a present father." And he said, "Well, in the time that you're pulling up in the driveway, you sit for a moment, you close your eyes, only for just 10 to 30 seconds, and you imagine how a good father and a good husband would turn back up at the house, and how he would engage in that quality time." Because you can achieve it all if you're leaving all the toxic stuff behind. Because normally people that want to have a good relationship and things like that, they go into it and they immediately their partner throws out something that's trying to dig to get that dopamine hit of that toxicity, because they've been brewing over things all day. And that you feed back into that, and then you're at each other, and then you visualize yourself as a bad father and as a bad husband, as a bad business person, or whatever it is. And that's really, and you become what you think about is really true, and you attract
Hmm.
the energy of what you are, and you can choose what you want to be. Is always a thing. And if you've just got to, but you've got to be disciplined as well, and that's where stoicism is in there. Because people
Right.
misunderstand stoicism, where they think, "Oh, you've just got to be unemotional about things." But stoicism actually is about putting everything in its place. Everything
Right.
has its right level of importance. Everything has its right level of energy output. Where people take a big thing that I see when people don't have any sort of balance at all and they're not happy, is when the one bad thing happens, they burn down the entire day. And I always give the saying to my clients. I said it's like you've shot out the other three tires because you got one flat. So
Right.
you've got to accept that in that moment, something bad has happened. A client has pulled out. You've lost money over something. Someone has done something bad to you. Somebody's left you a bad review, whatever it might be. Or you've had a fight with your wife. Do you have to fight with her for the next week, or or can you say to her, "Okay, honey, look, I know that. Let's talk this out. Let's try to have a better relationship." Because we're not, a lot of the time I see these days where people aren't working with their partners, they're not working with people. And I try to have a really good relationship with my team as well, and I
Hmm.
always make sure that because there's got to be a lot of give and take in that. But people are so highly strung, and as I said, they take one bad thing and ruin everything. They burn the house down.
Right. So when you get into like understanding this and understanding like your own emotional regulation, is this where like Brimble Media and like Brimble Recruitment comes into play? And like, how did you get off the ground with that? What were like the inspirations when you were looking at starting that?
So I always had my marketing consulting, and I originally, my very first print office and everything was called Snapfire Promotions. And back then I was kind of naive. The internet wasn't really taking off. I'd read a few books, and I thought Snapfire is an amazing name. And back then you could Google things, and Snapfire was a great name because Snapfire in the military means that you fire in this direction and then shoot back that way and fire in that direction with the same precision. So I thought that name was exceptional. But back then I didn't target my particular clients. I just worked with everyone, and I ended up working across 3 political campaigns. I did the marketing consulting on it. Then I did restaurants, cafes, service-based businesses, e-commerce when that started to come up. But then I realized that I wasn't niching down. And then I moved into marketing division was my name. And I had marketingdivision.net. But then when I was working with another guy, and he ended up locking me out of all my systems because I had an issue with software, and he didn't take the bad feedback very well, so he just locked me out of everything. So I immediately
Oof.
had to change names, and I had another business partner at the time. He was trying to make me like Gary V, and we were going to rebrand into Daniel B, but that didn't really synchronize with me. It didn't feel genuine or authentic to me, to my brand. So instead of going to from marketing division to Daniel B Media, I said Brimble Media has got to be the one. I said I've got to brand it. I've got to be the face of it. Something I do have to accept is that I lose the potential to sell the business. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this up, and it's going to be the operations behind every other venture that I do, because I've opened up all these other income stream websites. I've got some interest in some other businesses, and that's going to be my team behind everything else that I do. Because when you do brand it as yourself, you do have to accept that chances are, because even to this day, when we sometimes there's a misconception with the virtual assistant going into a business, because we brought in Brimble Recruitment Group because we were helping people to hire people, but then we ended up with specializing mainly in placing VAs through that business. Because virtual assistants, it seems like an amazing thing, but there are a lot of variables in there, and we ended up utilizing Brimble Recruitment for that, and helping people to recruit their remote staff and actually matching them personality wise. But it was one of my VAs has been working with me for over 10 years. The next longest has been over 3 years now. I think we're coming up on our bit over 3 year anniversary. But we're essentially, we pivoted into those areas, and then we opened up Brimble Certified to train VAs, because what we were finding is we were getting over 100 applications a day, and none of them were hitting the right skill levels as soon as they were put to work. So putting in Brimble Certified and actually training them. But essentially, they're all born out of, because what I see is I open up more brands and I put more staff in there, because I am very versatile in my skills sets. So I'm trying to sort of delegate into those areas and break up my team into those particular niches in order to make it more structured in a lot of ways.
Explain to me. I want to just backtrack really quickly, but I remember watching a podcast and you saying when doing the political campaigning, you realized you didn't want to do that anymore. Can you explain to me the difference in campaigning on like the political front as opposed to like marketing on any other ones, and why that kind of like you wanted to stay away from that?
Well, I was very good. I won 2 out of 3 of those campaigns, and I know that I was a big factor in the winning of that. But I don't. It's to me, there's businesses that I've stepped into, because I've worked with many different types of businesses. I've worked on the political campaigns. I've worked with churches on their marketing campaigns. I've also worked with adult businesses on their marketing campaigns. But a big thing is that the political ones. Uh, the last conversation that I had with one of my last clients, that was a politician, I just I just hated everything that he stood for, essentially, and
Mhm.
I didn't like how it was structured. And something that I would always ask him, I said, well, what are you going to do differently? You basically, your whole campaign that you want me to keep structuring is just dumping on your competitor. And I said that's not how we market a business. We talk about how you're going to do better. And that's what I see with a lot of political campaigns across the entire world. It's all about the competitor's bad, stay away from them, they're evil, so on and so forth. But I'd say to them, what are you actually going to do? What good are you going to do in the world? Because I actually do try to do everything that I do has a good backing at the end of it. I of course, naivety put me into a lot of different positions of going down a lot of different areas. But the political campaigns, and they would say to me, "Oh, we've got to get in before we know how much damage is done, and then we can fix it." And I say, "But you can see, you can look around you. There's this problem, that problem, this problem. and it just made me. I said that I would only run another political campaign if I knew the candidate well and they had some strong ideas, or if I was going to run myself. And
Right.
but I don't intend on running myself now because I've got different. I know that I can do a lot more good with other things that we're working on, and my ultimate visions of using the, because I think you've got to base the work off doing good in the world. Really, you've got to
Right.
look at worthwhile things. Where I always try to help my people in the Philippines. I always try to help them, whether if they've got kids that need to go to school and so on that don't have school fees. I always try to cover those sorts of things, and
Hmm.
we want to expand on those operations because I just don't. I just the more that I because I was quite involved in those political parties. They offered me all different things to stay in there. And I was doing so well for one political party that the other political party threatened to sue me that I was doing so
Hmm.
much just to try to stop me from working with them. So it's
Right.
yeah, but I don't know. I'm very in some ways I'm a little bit self-destructive in some ways, but in other ways it pivots me to where I actually want to be because it's always driving towards that goal.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of it's like through our conversation is based out of this like mindset, right? Of like trying to do good and making sure that you're kind of embodying what you would expect from other people, especially like working within your companies, right? Um, Kind of explain to me some of like the day-to-day like ideas or like traits that you may have that kind of allow you to like follow through with this mindset that you have. Are there certain like staples of your day that you have to do, or you kind of are disciplined to do during your day-to-day routine that kind of keeps you in this kind of moral balance?
Well, I always like another quote from Stoicism from Marcus Aurelius, and it's "Stop arguing what a good man should be and be one." And it's just because I think a lot of the time, if we sit down and we map, because it's something I'm very much about mapping out who I actually want to be and how what principles I want to carry and how what impact I want to make in the world and how I want the world to look for me. So normally, if you start mapping that out, something that you see is you start seeing the things that you're doing that are self destructive that's getting you in that direction. And it's very much we've got to let go of because I know that I said earlier that I feel like I'm half as far as I wanted to be by this point in my life, but at the same time, there's the compounding effect. The reason why people
Hmm.
pay me for consulting now is because I've gone through all of this stuff that hasn't worked
You've
out for me.
experienced it for them.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the compounding effect because you can't be the person without all this happening. And something
Right.
I don't, I wouldn't say that I'm religious, but I'm spiritual. But when you ask to be a certain type of person, you have to you manage you get it's like I know there's a religious quote that I wanted to be brave, so God gave me reasons to have courage. But on the daily, I try to minimize the things that I'm doing that are self-destructive. I try to listen to my own in a dialogue and know when I'm being overreactive on things. And when something bad happens, I stop and I take a deep breath and I make sure that I put it in its proper rational place. But of course, setting up the day, it's the old cliche. You want to set up the day properly and you want to get yourself in the right mindset to start the day. So you want to, regardless if you're spiritual, religious, or anything, you start the day with a bit of prayer because you're talking it out to the energy of the universe, and you want to start the day with something good to eat. You don't want to feel like you're rushing through the day because in rushing through it, but sometimes you feel like you're behind in the day, but you want to let that go because sometimes if you're so you want to start. I like to start the day a little bit slower. I like to roll out of bed, get some water, pat my dog, take him out for a walk. The dog is having a pet is a big thing to actually get you to stop taking and take those breaks. And then it's sort of making sure that you're thinking about the things that you put into your body and your mind for that day. So making sure that you're eating something that's actually. I saw another really good interview and it changed me a couple months ago, and it was He was a guy. He was setting up a big function, and there was a billionaire there, and the billionaire said, what do you want? And he goes, oh, for the food. And he goes, oh, I'm going to order a whole bunch of sandwiches. Do you want that? And he goes, no. The billionaire goes, no, I don't want all that. I just want a bit of tuna fish and a bit of salad. And he goes, because I need to fuel myself to perform at the level that I need to perform at.
Hmm.
Where a lot of
And how do
people,
you?
yeah,
No, continue. Sorry, continue.
yeah, a lot of people aren't fueling themselves, and at the same time, people are these days they're scrolling through social media and they're watching things that they're taking their own energy away and getting it sucked into other ends instead of
And
consuming.
and my next question going into that is a lot of these principles that you're having on your daily like life, and especially like a lot of your past experience. How are you like creating that into like a digestible form for your clients? Like if the argument is, okay, you can trust me because I've been through it, well, the expectation for them to see succeed is at some point they would have to go through it. So like how do I prep them that at some point it ain't going to work out, and like how do I not turn that pessimistic, and how do I not how do I make that a form of, hey, it's an expectation that this is going to happen, but it's okay.
Well, it's rough because I do a bit of personal coaching as well for clients, where I help them to sort of find their way through things, and some clients just hire me just for that. And it's which I don't do too many because it's one-on-one is very much under, it's not leverageable enough for a growing business. You sort of cap off your income, but I think you've just got to uh, set their expectations early on. I think in the world today, like if you look up anything, there's a guru there telling you that you're going to be successful in the next 24 hours, essentially. And
Right.
everyone's got those expectations. But the reality is, I think a big sometimes I lose clients because I say, look, I told them the reality of things. I said, look, you can go off in this direction, and sometimes things just won't work. And I'm just very honest with them. And I say, but it's okay. And I think it's very much encouraging them to be more present in their lives. And gratitude is a great daily practice as well, because regardless of what you're going through right now, it's this too shall pass is the old cliche
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
thing. But if you don't go through it, and if people are so quick to wish away their lives, and I think it's the encouraging my clients to have the love of the journey as well, to get excited about the small wins, and to get excited because we launch podcasts for clients as well, and I get them excited about their first podcast, and I give them feedback, but I give them a great feedback, and I also make sure that they know that this is amazing what they're doing right now in this very moment. Because even when because of course in the early days when I was in my early 20s, I burnt myself out, and that's something that I learned. But if I took myself out of if I spoke to myself then, I would have told myself not to worry about it, just to go do that compounding efforts again, just go build it up. Because at the same time, success is an everyday thing. It's not the destination. A lot of people think that as soon as they hit this point, that this is success. This has a different feeling than anything else. But every time I've hit success by people's definition of success, it doesn't feel any different. It just because you're in the movement. And I think if we can convince people, and I can convince my clients that everything that they're doing right now is success, because you are it at the time, and it's just not you can't, because this is where people think that, because and also at the same time it's very difficult to tell a story. It's very without giving, because we normally we talk about our past, even it being the start, we're talking about the hero's journey, but everything is still in motion. Everything and it's only a critical point because you've made it a critical point, and you've made it something that's been a life change. But at the same time, that means that you have an option. It's optional to say, okay, this has gone bad. How am I going to deal with this now? How am I going to? Because that's all. If people start asking what now instead of why me, then they'll change their entire lives.
It's interesting you say that because I get to certain points where I almost feel like I'm being too hard on myself. Where I say, we have a good episode, or we start making like monetization or something, and you get really excited. But I kind of have to sit with myself and say, well, it's great, but this is also the worst we're going to be, because the next day we're going to be 1% better, the next day we're going to be one. But it's one of those things where, how do you balance like preparing myself for future endeavors, but also being like grateful of like the accomplishments? And it's a very fine line of like, how much are you taking your foot off the gas? Because it's like, okay, if I lay off too much, I'm going to miss opportunities, I'm not going to be as dialed in as I should be, because I'm just living life, right? But it's I think that's a very, very difficult thing. And like, do you think that is more of a personality trait, or more of like a studied thing? Like, is it nature or nurture at that point?
Well, I think anyone can. Of course, you've got things from your childhood that you've been nurtured to. It depends how your parents praised you and so on. But you can change yourself. But we all have these inbuilt ideas, and society is a because we've been all brought up to see different things in different ways. They want to entertain us as kids to say that, well, now this is done, that you live happily ever after, and so on. But I think you've got to keep yourself in that zone of creation, and not you've got to not be satisfied in any area. You do have to do that 1% better all the time. You've got to keep that going, and that's got to be in all elements of your life. You've got to be healthier. You've got to have better relationships, but you've got to have it at a grounded pace of knowing that we're intentionally building this. We're intentionally doing this
Right.
together, and we're intentionally hitting this on our own. And I just it's I like the thing where a lot of the time when I have really great weeks or months, I clear all my money into the investments and into the business and into the platform, so I can keep myself on the hunt, keep myself building, keep myself going. Because in the past, I would either go out and get myself something luxury. I'll go blow it on a good little trip. That it really was out of this way. I know in my early years we'd rent like a minibus and we'd go out and would party, and it would just it would but all the bar tab will be covered on my end for those
Hmm.
those good times. But at the
Right.
same time, those good times, they don't last. If you can do, and it wasn't a like you. Of course, you want to invest in building you want to do big events and invest in building the business, but you don't want to be blowing the money for the sake of blowing it up. For Because it does things come in high and lows, and you never get to the top levels if you're spending recklessly. You're always going to keep the cash flow things open. But yeah, you've got to. I think it is definitely you've got to be grounded in yourself and be self-aware enough to know that things right now can go either way, and always like life is so unpredictable, and we don't. Another saying in Stoicism is "memento mori," and memento mori means remember you will die, or remember you must die. And because eventually you could walk out the front, get hit by a car, and it's
It's
all
all
over.
over.
And
Right.
it's so I think being grounded in that and never being satisfied in where you're at that moment, but at the same time being grateful, it is a fine balance. And it sounds like, wow, I'm going in two different directions, but at the same time, you're living life and you're always striving for more. Because well, we don't know what's going to happen next. None of us can really confirm after this, but really, legacy is and doing great work, I think, is the proudest things that we can do, and striving for more. Because really, well, you look for a history. If our ancestors, because these days people are too comfortable as well, and if our ancestors didn't strive to build these massive cities and invent the early forms of technology and didn't work tirelessly to make that happen, we wouldn't have the comfortable lives that we have today. So
Hmm.
so
So,
staying a little bit uncomfortable is the key.
well, yeah, it's like be comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is kind of where I find it interesting where your story, because it involves scaling, but then it also involves multiple side steps of like, now, was this something where like you were seeing holes in these other businesses and then it was a better venture than it would be to capitalize on reinvesting in, say, marketing? I kind of want to hear about that as well. Like, where was that pivot point where you decided, okay, I'm at like a good pace here, but there's also a need for this that's going to help me bring it back, and like everything's kind of funneling the right directions. But where was that need, especially when I talk like where I'm trying to get into this, which is like talking about like Brimble certified and your podcast and stuff like that. Where was that notice that you kind of needed to sidestep in order to gain success across the board?
Well, it's definitely all refinement for me, and often I also get bored with a lot of things, and I get at times like I've done marketing for so many different things and so many different businesses, and some of them just some of them don't excite me anymore. Some of them don't get me to where I want to be. Some of them are not leverageable enough because there's only if you work with a lot of small businesses one on one, there's only so many that you can work with, and you can't leverage that as much as if you build into these other things. And of course, we've done businesses and pivots that haven't worked out, pivots that I didn't enjoy for all different reasons. But I sort of pivoted because it's it's a refinement. Sometimes we had to pivot, like during the pandemic. A lot of our business clients were locked down, and I was losing stacks of money every month. So I went, okay, well, what's the solution? What have I got to do? And that's where we went into a lot of the adult industry stuff, because that was where things were going really well, and I could just readapt my marketing strategies into promoting that. But I sort of didn't like doing that. And as soon as I saw an out that was no longer, and I could see a lot of issues coming up in that industry, and it didn't really make me feel comfortable because I didn't like how it was affecting men, and I didn't, and I saw sides of men. I didn't realize how broken all the men around me were, and that's something that really opened my eyes as well. Because so many men are broken, they're lonely, they don't have the stoicism in their lives, and they haven't self-assessed like I have. So I'd actually prefer to do that. But then we do like we Brimble Media has always been a given because I've always marketing consulted, and I know that it's a great area. We don't open up to as many other businesses now. We do some, but when I found that I was starting to utilize VAs for my own clients and they were utilizing my VAs, it was just natural to help them to place more. And I realized
Mhm.
how great I was at finding the right people, and how great my VAs at finding the right people. A lot of one of my VA's family is starting to come in and work for us because all of her family have skills and so on. So that's sort of where
Right.
Brimble Recruitment and Brimble Certified really just handled. We wanted to do something great because I love to employ the people in the Philippines as well, because I know that you employ one and you help an entire family. And so that's really it's so Brimble Certified is a bit more of a love work more than, and also filters into finding the right people, because we train them to set up their own VA business in Brimble Certified. So we're actually training them up to compete with us, which is fine because there's so much work in the market. But we have pivoted onto businesses that have, like last year, we tried. I thought this is great. This is amazing. We can help businesses. We can help people to recoup money from the government that they have lost through unpaid refunds and lost pension funds and bank refunds and lawsuits that have paid out that they haven't got, class actions. And I thought this was great. We'll just set up a VA and we'll funnel people in, and we called it Money Finders Pro. And we thought this is a great business model, but the Australian market didn't take to it. They didn't trust to put their details in to get searched for money owing to them. Even when we contacted people and said, "Oh, you got money owing to them," "Oh, it's a scam. It's a scam." Because the
Oh
Australian
yeah.
market's quite a difficult one, and it's where I've more moved my marketing consulting and more, because I've got to get book service to help other people to get on podcasts, TV, radio, and we've even got them on streaming services. and it's a great service. But most of my clients are coming in from Canada, the US, because the Australian market's always been very difficult. So
Hmm.
the sometimes I like to pivot because I like to tinker in things, and because I got all the skills, I can build out the websites. I can start a business that will cost somebody else thousands of dollars can cost me hundreds of dollars because I've got all
You
the,
already
the
got the
core foundation in
infrastructure.
there. So I like to have a good crack, and I always like passive incomes. I like new exciting things. We're just launching a business awards in the state that I'm in Queensland.
Hmm.
Where at the moment I'm syncing up with one of my friends that has a marketing agency, and he's going to take a lot of the referral work through there because I don't want all of that at the moment, but I want the build up of that. So we sort of do like to have a go at different things because you at the same time you can sort of hit a ceiling in what you're doing, and but my vision is more leverage, more passive. Because it all leads me because my goal up here is still the same. I wouldn't say my end goal, but the reason I got into business, I've sort of realized in the last year, the reason I got into business way when I was a child that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I haven't gone in that direction. So I've
Right.
sort of continued to create that structure, and these businesses are very much more leverageable for me because I can get my VAs to run them. I can bring in business partners. I can leverage a lot more in that.
Right. Right. Now, this kind of brings us to starting a podcast. Uh, I love the name. Attention is the currency, which I couldn't agree more. When you look at digital media in today's day and age, you're counting for billions of eyes on the content. So if you can properly leverage that and be able to create things that are actually going to get that attention, that definitely can equal the dollars. What was the motivation? Was this again like you were trying to learn something new? And was was this your first shot at doing a podcast? Uh, What like take me through the early stages of that?
So I've done podcasts with other people, and I've also run podcasts for my clients. Attention is the currency really became the podcast, so I could leverage my own personal brand, so I could actually start building on that. And attention as a currency has a few layers. I'm also launching I'm finishing off my book, which is around attractive character marketing. So being the face of the brand. So that
Okay.
book will hopefully come out in the by early next year is when I intend on finishing that up and self-publishing that, and I'll have a launch party which I'll send you an invite for. So because
Yeah.
it's going to be all online, but that book is very much it's based around creating your personal brand and being able to use your personal brand to go into any other business and make it successful. Uh, for example, everyone knows who started Apple. Nobody knows who started Samsung. So
Right.
that's one because but if Steve Jobs went to any other business, if he was still around and put his face on it, everyone would be like, "Oh, that's Steve Jobs," and they'd all rush
Right.
in to purchase at that business. But you can create that for yourself, and that's the power of our modern day, where a lot of people aren't leveraging their personal brand. And for a long time, it also comes back into my story. I was always the reason why a lot of people haven't heard of me and don't know what I've done is because I've always seen myself as behind the scenes. That introvert still comes out, and I go, I'll just push this person forward and I'll still be successful because they'll be successful. And you know what? They'll look after me when they're successful. But that doesn't happen.
That doesn't
They,
matter. Yeah.
yeah, which is my naivety and also my own self-limiting beliefs. So that's one element of attention is the currency is my book launch. The next element is that I want to help other people to start out on podcast. I'm reaching out to a lot of my friends, previous clients, current clients, and saying, "Look, I want to start getting you on podcasts. I'll put you on my podcast first, and if you're interested, we can also do the get booked ones because I know that this is going
Right.
to leverage your whole business because it opens up all the doors. You open up because I go on your podcast, you come on my podcast." We chat, and then I'm in your audience, you're in my audience, and it's maximum leverage. It's
Yeah.
huge because you can't get that kind of thing if you wanted to get that from ads. You're spending hundreds to thousands of dollars for that same amount of leverage as podcasts is. So that's one, and at the same time, because we're doing podcast management more and more, we're launching these clients' podcasts, and we're in quite a few different. We've got several great, amazing podcasts that have launched and are in launch production. And having my own podcast also allowed me to restructure everything. Because I was going, because we were going through all of the promotions again, we were going through all the guesting, because we refine on our guest solutions, which we implement into our clients' businesses. We also have we face the. It's interesting running my own podcast and not running it for my clients, because I hit a lot of the pitfalls and I have to turn up and be the
Yeah,
host.
you gotta show up, and that's
Yeah,
like and it's interesting too because like how how you see it when it's your own thing as opposed to doing something else. It's like the failure doesn't always hit the same way, even if you're putting the same amount of work in. And on top of like the idea of podcasting where you say like you recommend it to everybody, I always say the same thing to other people that I know is like you could be a bladesmith and have a podcast. You
yeah.
could be a travel advisor and have a pod because all you're trying to do is then interview people within that niche or interview people to get what their experience was like in a certain situation. But you're all like I always tell people you're simply just limited by your creativity. Like the more creative you are, like it just opens up the door. But like a lot of people, they just stonewall themselves and they go, ah, that's stupid. I don't think it will work. Why would I do that? And it's like, I don't know. Try, see what happens. Right.
Well, the big
It,
problem is that people try, they start out, and then they don't get immediate results. Like they saw somebody else make $1 billion overnight, and then they think that
yeah.
it doesn't work for them. But it's
Yeah. But
yeah,
once you do the research and you find out those people were like recruited by these big media agencies and like their shit just got pumped up and you're like, "Oh, okay." Like it all kind of like makes sense, but it you see that and it kind of gives you a little newfound like understanding or respect for doing it in an organic way or finding out what works and what doesn't work, right? And it's like every day you just come back to the drawing board and go, oh, I did this, I did that, I did that. This didn't really work. I had this guest on. It wasn't really the best interview. So I might try to stay away from try because it just doesn't match. But that same guest could go on to a different podcast and be amazing, right? It's not that any which way is failures. It's just some work better than others. And it's really interesting because when you look at like the podcast medium, it's almost going into like the era of like news radio, talk shows, stuff like that, where you see a lot of these other mediums that they use are now like failing because it's like people just have a lot more like spots to leverage. Like people just have a lot more ability. And as well, they can create their own roadmaps, right? Like it's not something where like you're politically leveraged or it's like some sort of like agenda, right? But it is very, very interesting how like the podcasting world works out. And I kind of want to know from your perspective with all this like business expertise, how do you give yourself a mindset to still allow yourself to learn from your guests without it being like a power imbalance?
well, I always make sure that I don't show all of my expertise on the podcast. I think that's something very key. I think you've always got to, yeah. I let the guests, I let the guests talk through that, and even if I disagree with them, and I always say to them beforehand, even if I disagree with you, I'm not going to correct you. I'm going to let you keep going, because I think when you're interviewing, you are just letting the person that's on there. I remember I saw a clip with Grant Cardone, and he's with an interview, and this interviewer was terrible. And if he can, in a sense that Grant Cardone gave him a very important lesson, where you're going to be when you're on the interview, you're going to be looking for that information. And Grant Cardone said something like, "Most of my big mistakes in life were made through college." And the interviewer then said, "Well, I don't feel like that was the same way for me." And Grant Cardone turns to him and goes, "Well, we're not interviewing you."
Yeah, exactly. This isn't about you.
Yeah, that's it. And I
But
think that's yeah.
do you feel like you had to like do you feel like your skills in business kind of like prepped you for something like that? And like what are some skill sets you think people in like their early podcasting experience, like what are some kind of soft skills that people should learn early on in order to like facilitate those conversations?
Well, my business skills definitely helped me in that because, I've been the thing that got me from being an introvert to an extrovert was sales skills and to finding those people's needs. But I've long before I had my podcast, I did the 3 political campaigns, and I would be coaching them on the questions, the answers, and I would work out what the most difficult questions that would be asked, and I would write down multiple answers on that. So then when they get asked, when they do their press conferences, when they do their newspaper articles, I've already coached them on the worst things they could be asked and how, because there's the two that won that in my political history were the most two controversial ones. They were the ones that were probably the least ethical of the three. And so when the big ethical model came up and things that they would be questioned on, I already had answers prepared for them. So having a deep think about that, but at the same time, for CEOs around the world, a CEO that I was working with in Germany attracted hundreds of millions in capital into his business. I was writing his speeches, I was coaching him on his interviews, and he was doing all that. But essentially, so those sorts of things helped. But really, working out. Uh, the sales end of things really help, and having a bit of, if you're starting out in podcasting, you sort of do have a sales model to your podcast. You find out that you always have a structure of your story. I think I've got a that's not one of them, but I always print out a full structure, and whether you
Mm-hmm.
stick to it or not, because even for my own being interviewed, I always have a structure. I've already got a rough idea of the stories I'm going to tell you. You take it in a different direction, but I can pivot to that section. Just having conversations, and it's definitely. And I think if somebody is a bit shy or a bit introverted, just starting to have conversations with elderly people, they love it. Ask them questions about their lives, and they'll talk and talk and talk, and that will get you started. And just take an interest and listen to the things. And a lot of people, I think the biggest challenge in podcasting, if you want to be a good communicator, is you've got to, because I heard a good saying for sales, which I had to sort of pivot back out of, was you listen to understand and not listen to respond. But when you're a podcasting interviewer, you sort of need to have at least latch onto
Yeah.
one thing and grab that response, because you need to ask that next engaging question. But if you've got that structure in mind, you can always fall back on that structure when you're doing your podcast, and you do, because I know, Ryan, you watched some of my podcasts before. If you watch enough of them, you see that I've always got that flow on structure. And
Right.
I never, there's been a couple of times that I'm stuck for something to say because I'm so engaged with the guest, and I've noticed that
Yeah,
you've
you
done a
don't know
couple of
where to
times for me.
go.
Yeah, that you're like, oh yes, it's my turn to talk. He stopped talking.
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can't help that because we're engaged. Engaged into individuals that we're both looking to learn something. We're looking to get that information, but you're looking to extract that. But that's where you can always fall back on that structure.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because the things that I had to work on were more of like allowing those spaces for people to talk, right? And it's the same kind of thing as what you're saying. I was more listening to formulate my next response instead of actually understanding what they're trying to say and like what's the message that I'm trying, because it's like a double-edged sword. I want to make my guests comfortable, I want to make sure I'm engaged, but I also want to create content that's digestible and make, because a lot of times I find what happens is you get so deep into a conversation where then what happens is as soon as you break that trance, it's like, oh shit, where are we? And what were
Yeah,
we talking about? And was this 20 minutes actually something like, because I always look and I say, like, I always have to put myself in the eyes of the viewer and go, if I were to look at this with no context, would I have any clue what's going on? And that's what I always try to like when I'm having guests on and stuff. I always try to say, like, I'm trying to, like, this is what I'm trying to tell. So, like, before we start this is what I'm trying to do. Right. So then it's like we're going down the same path together. Right. But it's, it's a dance, right? Like it's a balance of like, okay, I want to tell this story and I want to make sure they're authentic as possible, but I also want to make sure that like the information that they're giving me is like, I'll give you an example. I interviewed a CEO of a rideshare company and he started talking about metrics and this and that. And I had to ask him, hey, you're going to have to break that down because it's like, well, I've done my research and I know what you're talking about, but I know that people listening in are like, what is this guy saying? Right. So it's a very fine line.
Well,
With all this, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was excited to go on this podcast because normally I don't get to talk about the mindset and everything like that. And
Yeah.
normally, I think a big thing for some guests that they're so stuck. Like if you get some of these experts in an area, they're so stuck on the statistics, and they're so used to talking to people that get it, and used to talking to business, just solely business people. Because what I realized from doing these podcasts is I'm talking to people at all different levels. And normally I don't get to talk about my stoicism. I don't get to talk about my about the mindset and other elements of things. But yeah, I think the big thing is that that's where they've got to get used to talking in general conversation.
Yeah. And it's, I find too, without, without lamenting on the podcast, like I find it's also, um, like pretty refreshing for people, like how many times you leave a podcast and how many times you leave a recording and go, oh, that was really good. Like even outside of making content and outside of like doing this for whatever reason, it's also like engaging with people and like having those conversations where I think a lot of people miss the fact that like you're still having like a conversation with, like in our case, like someone, people we have, like I haven't met you before, right? So it's interesting in that sense where people can kind of, I find if you break it down enough, like you can still find something to take away from it, even if like you get into situation as it crashes and burns, right? Like it's still one of those things of like, well, I was still able to kind of see how this went. I was able to interact with someone that I've never met before and open my eyes to something that I would never have got the chance to otherwise, right? Um, when when you look at like your younger self and all the experience that you have, what would you say is like some advice that you would give to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Well, it seems cliche, but it's always you got to believe in yourself, and you can't stop believing in yourself, and actually you've got to have expectation that things are going to work out for you. I think that's something that's very key because a lot of people they've already written themselves off before that, and including myself in my younger years. Because back when I started, people weren't on the internet doing the things they are now. They weren't young people telling people how to market their business. Now I go into a business and I've been doing this for so long, but there's a 18, 19, 20-year old kid there also advising their business. But
Hmm.
back then, people told me I was too young. People told me I didn't know, but I did know. I read, I knew more than they did, and now
Right.
I know additionally more than many, and I know a lot more than these young people because I've already done it and I've failed and I've gone through. And failure is not a bad thing. It's something that we should also make sure that we I pass on to him and also just focus on what I actually want and not go down the tracks of the things that just seem like I'm supposed to do is very solid advice. Because if I focused on everything that I just really wanted, like I do these days, it would have been a completely different game. But
Hmm.
essentially, I don't regret anything because it made me who I am today, and I still consider myself young. I still when I look at myself in the mirror in the morning, I just go, "Wow, I'm still 26 or 25, somewhere in there."
Hmm. Yeah.
That's how I feel and how I view myself, and really getting there's still a lot of time left, and I've really enjoyed the journey because I've done a lot of different stuff, and I've done a bit of work in between. I've experienced a lot of things. Probably something that my biggest regret, my only regret, is not traveling more. Travel
Mm.
is the most beautiful thing to do. Experiencing new places, cultures. I love being a bit sweaty, getting off a bus with a backpack somewhere I've never been before. It's
Mhm.
it's not about the luxury really, because that's ultimately where I can see myself in the next couple of years after I clean everything up. I keep building the personal brand. I keep building the systems and structures. You'll just see me going around the world with a camera, blogging everywhere I go.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I definitely feel the same way. It's one thing where I feel like getting around and experiencing and seeing those different cultures, it just kind of informs your next steps, and it allows you to take in things that you would never see before and understand things on a totally other side of the world or wherever that may be. But yeah, it's amazing, and I think like the world we're living in today is definitely something that people need to take more advantage of, and express their creativity, and like you said, you know, take a bet on themselves and challenge themselves and trust their instincts and really like go forward with their ideas and passions, because there's no time than the present. And uh, the biggest courage that I tell people is like the courage of starting. Is like that's the hardest step to take, is just doing it. And then it's like, well, you can figure all the rest of the stuff out once you get into it. But it's like taking that first step is like, you know, that's the most courageous thing you're going to have to do. And it's like everything else after that is just like, you know, so much it's so much wealth of experience that you're just people are stopping themselves right at the door before they're even giving the opportunity to try it,
Well, I think to
right?
add to that is not expect an overnight success. See, everyone says,
Mhm.
"Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 12 months?" It's something you've got to see a compounding effect. Is the thing. Where do you see yourself in the next 24 hours? Would be the first step. Where do you see yourself then? So, how do I want to feel at the end of today? How do I want to feel at the end of the week? Cut it down more, because every single time that you do something in your business, in your podcast, in your life, it compounds. And you push out one podcast interview, you could get another one follow, 10 follows, whatever it is. 5 more people know about you. Whatever it is, it's compounding. You close one
Mhm.
more deal, or you do another partnership. That's one more, one more, one more, and that's what compounds. See, people think that there's a magic pill, there's a magic bullet. But what I always say in my business, and what always changed it for me, is that I just need to contact another 10, 50, 20, however many people every single day. And I just need to do one more interview, one more video, and just one more. Keep going. Not
Mhm.
because everyone wants an overnight success now, but at the same time, I'll tell you what, I've had very luxurious times, and I've had very poverty times, I guess you'd say, but nothing like some parts of the world. But throughout both times, nothing really changed. I didn't personally change. If you look after your, because of course I've had some health scares over the years, and a lot of most of that's from burning out, doing too much work, and eating not correctly. But if you look after your health, all those you don't change. But the energy that shifts for you is when you see yourself as abundant, and you see yourself as building, and you see yourself as compounding. So yeah,
Right.
it's definitely not looked to too far ahead.
Yeah. It's definitely amazing. And I've this last hour and a bit, I've had an incredible conversation with you, Daniel. And I want to thank you
Great. Yeah.
for being so open and sharing your story, the tough lessons, the mindsets. It's all coming into the wisdom that you have now. and the creativity and the journey that you have forward. And now with your podcast and with your recruiting and your virtual assistant, and it's a clear testament of like you're trying to kind of throw other people the proverbial life raft and say like, no, 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 you can come join me. And like if you could do just as well, you can excel. And like we want to just give you the tools to put in your tool belt. And I think that's very commendable to be using your life journey as like a blueprint for other people to kind of see that vision, right? Um,
Well,
yeah,
I personally
I
love it because I hold up the statistics between my podcast and one of my clients that just launched, and
yeah,
when they exceed mine, we both have we all have a laugh about it. I go, congratulations, and I love people. I think as you get older, you love seeing people surpass you as well, and as soon as you
yeah.
lose that ego end, it's amazing.
Where can people find you or learn more about your podcast, VA training platform, or Brimble certified or Brimble
Well,
Media?
if you follow us on socials, because we've got Brimble Media across all of them, I also have significant. I've got about 10,000 followers on my personal profile, and I also post a lot of the things that I'm up to there. I'm just about to start video blogging again at Daniel Brimblecombe for Facebook. You can all follow me, even if you can't friend me. You can also go to brimblemedia.com if you want to explore working with us for our Get Books service or our podcast management, or if you've got something else. Often, although I don't go down all these other tracks, if you've got a political campaign or something like that, I will explore it if you want to jump in there and send it
Yeah,
through a message. But brimblemedia.com is a good one. We're just revamping the website again at the moment. But Brimble Recruit for recruitment options. We do recruiting across all industries but mainly VAs. Brimble Certified is on there at the moment. If you're looking to become a virtual assistant, we have a great crash course which equivalates to, I think it's less than $20 to jump on the crash course, which is about 30 Australian dollars. So if anyone wants to do that, it works out to be about 1,000 pesos for the Filipinos. So
there
yeah,
you go.
that's on brimblerecruit.com, and we're building out a Brimble certified website at the moment because we're making a full training functions into there, and also going off in all different directions, whether they want to be web developers or graphic designers or video editors. But yeah, and attention is the currency.com. I got the domain, which is always good when you get
Perfect.
one of those crafty ones. So you can check out the podcast, and we stream on all the major uh, platforms as Spotify and also
Apple.
YouTube and everywhere else. We have full
Yeah,
distribution.
that's amazing. Well, thanks again for joining me on episode 47 of Solo Spotlight. I'm wishing you all the best in everything that you're building and teaching. And hopefully, in the near future, we can have you back on and get an update of how you've been doing and what you have planned.
Great, thank you, Ryan. I had a great time, and I hope everyone
No problem.
got some gold nuggets out of there, some value.
Of course. Uh, don't forget, everybody listening, you can follow us on social media: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, TikTok. Uh, And yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friend that might be starting a podcast or is in the media. Uh, and yeah, be sure to follow our guest, Daniel Brimblecombe, and brimblemedia.com. And this has been episode 47 of Solo Spotlight with Ryan Macdougall. We will see you for the next one.